This is LS, and you're on Thorin's YouTube channel, so cut the Western shit.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Narrative Wake, which of course means my co-host for this show is Kelsey Moser. In case anyone's wondering, right, oh wow, what did you have, like a really special heart-to-heart after you wrote that article in tribute to Kelsey? If you think that, you haven't been paying attention, you don't know either of us as people. No, the answer's not. Basically, the reaction to that article was like that Nas album title. It was written, and that's all that needs to matter. That's all that matters. If you enjoyed it, you enjoyed it. If you didn't, you didn't. We're moving on. So that's fully in keeping with the chemistry that we've built up over this show over many years. Our guest for this episode is, of course, Ashley Kang, who is, I will stress, the founder of Korizon Esports. So in case anyone ever thinks that it's just one person putting stuff up, and any kind of Reddit mod or someone wants to run afoul of that's not the case. She represents the very prestigious and large, asterisk, insert the truth down there, organisation Korizon from South Korea, which publishes all those great interviews we all enjoy. So hello, Ashley.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
That's all right. Right, the premise for this episode is basically, if you know Narrative Wake, like we don't just do like the day-to-day things and just follow a league on each week. We try to have like a big topic and dive into it. So what we thought was, since there is no MSI, I mean, there is that like mid-season cup thing between LPL and LCK, but there's no MSI where we can't see G2 play Cloud9 and T1, Jingdong, etc. We just decided to do it in our minds because that's the sort of people we are. So if you don't like that again, you know which way the door is. So there isn't going to be a real one. So the premise is going to be like, first of all, let's put some ground rules down. First of all, we're only going to talk about the 4 major regions. We're not going to go into the other ones just because, let's be real, like it would be diminishing returns in terms of how much people are interested anyway. And then also, I don't know how much anyone in this chat even watched those. So we'll just leave that to one side. We'll just do the 4 big teams, basically. And my premise coming into the show would be a mixture of, we talk about all of the 4 teams, we talk about them in relation to each other, we kind of shadow box how they might play against each other, and then maybe for fun, we pick like a winner who would win the tournament or something. And that's a rough guide map. I think we can start there. So, right, I thought the obvious place to start is, why don't we talk about T1, and Ashley can give us her insights in that regard. So first thing I want to ask you, actually, Ashley, to start this off is, obviously T1 actually did something that is a classic T1 move. They've done it many, many times in the LCK era, which is don't finish first in the actual regular part of the split, finish second, or in the past they've even finished below that, but then just make the run, and then whoever was number 1 and all the fans get hyped, oh, someone else is going to win other than SKT, they just win in the final anyway. So did you actually, before the final, did you think that T1 was the best team in Korea? Did you have Gen G? Did you have Dragon X? Where were your kind of allegiances lying before the final?
Before the final?
Yeah.
Okay, so before the final, when we were walking into Genji versus T1, I put my bets on, figurative bets on T1 Genji 3-1. I didn't know it was going to be a complete sweep, Series 0, but I just thought that T1 already had their game plan figured out. I really like what Kim Jong-soo, the new head coach, as well as the strong analytical team they have behind Kim, is doing with the drafts and picks. Like, they put out very, very solid drafts with a very large window of win conditions. So yes, I did expect T1 to win the finals. Okay.
What are some thoughts then on T1? Like I saw, actually, I'll give it a shout out here. I saw the MSC preview that you did with Emily Rand. And in that particular show, she suggested actually that the experts she's talking to think T1 is the best team in the whole world. I mean, I personally would have thought the assumption would be G2 or Jingdong, just because LPL's won most of the big tournaments, and then G2 is just G2. Like, are you kind of coming down on a similar ground? Do you think T1, just as a little preview for later in the, are you feeling like they're the best team in the world right now?
So I actually don't think Jingdong is the most competitive team in the LPL now. Okay, Kelsey is like frowning slightly, so you're more than free to disagree.
You never know where she's going. Don't worry about
it. Okay. If I was looking at all the teams, I would say the strongest team right now is G2 with Perks back in the AD carry role and Cavs back in the mid lane. It is true that T1 had a very strong run, and you can't deny that T1 just pulls out a better performance when it comes to best of 5. Part of that could be Faker's influence, who has stepped into a bit more of a bigger leadership role. Teddy, who is very consistent no matter which stage he performs. And one thing that's really cool about T1 is they have perfected their game plan. especially into the later half of Summer Split. They know how to play around their mid lane. With Faker having that wide variety of champion pool, they do tend to shift their focus a bit more towards their bot lane compared to other top teams in the region, with which is expectedly because Teddy is such a reliable carry slash explosive damage dealer. And Kana is sitting up there. He reminds me of Impact back in the old SKT. Like, he can play those carry champions when the drafting requires of him, but he can also excel in champions like Ornn or even Gangplank, just like in the camping, like staying at the top lane and just absorbing all the pressure. And I think T1 has a really nice chemistry going on, and that's why they look so strong. However, I would be interested to see T1 go against more volatile strategies of other regions, which is where they have often failed, especially during 2019. How they're going to deal with super aggressive, like chaotic playstyle of some of the LPL teams, or creative, adaptations of G2. So that's why I'm not sure about T1.
Okay. Before we jump in, I'll have Kelsey obviously give her thoughts. And one last question about T1, which is, in all the past major international tournaments, since I've seen you following League of Legends and working and putting these interviews up, you have on Twitter very heavily ridden whoever the best Korean team is as they're going to win the tournament, whether it was T1 or you've been in that sense, you've been a very good Korean, right? You now sound a lot more cagey. I mean, this tournament isn't even going to happen technically, actually. There isn't going to be this MSI. It's just imaginary. Is there a reason why you're a little bit more cagey about just saying T1's the best, whereas in the past, you kind of parlayed the fact that they won Korea to they should win Worlds, should win MSI, right?
So people have to make a distinction between my Twitter personality and my real personality. On Twitter, I'm obviously going to be the LCK fangirl. Okay. And I like writing on that because I think LEC and LCS, and even those as LPL, has very heavy official public representation of their individual leagues. Sure. And I think in that way, LCK is a bit less represented, and also Twitter being that kind of medium, you have to kind of get yourself out there a bit more aggressively. So I do play that role of LCK is going to win Worlds. This is the years of the LCK. But okay. If I had to be more realistic and present my thoughts in one of the settings like that, this is my honest opinion that, T1 looks solid. I really like what they are doing. I would even say that T1, this might be a stronger, more reliable iteration of T1 compared to 2019, which had a higher ceiling but a bit more volatile with that given competition. But I wouldn't place them as the strongest team in the MSI, even though I will say they're quite close to it.
Okay. Right, come on, Kelsey. What do you think of T1?
I think T1 are a very interesting team to watch, just in terms of how they've changed. Obviously, you have Cuz, who's sort of redeemed himself from the eras where he was a little bit of a bad word in the Korean jungle. And then you have, he's playing way more for lanes, I would say, than you typically see a lot of LCK junglers play, which is interesting because going into the new patches, which I assume MSI would actually take place on a post
10.10.
Would take place on a post 10.8 patch, right? So that's when you would see the jungle changes, and it would actually go back to favoring the style where laners just kind of push and junglers invade, and you're playing more for jungle matchup, right? So I could see that being something that actually kind of swings away from them. I also think it's really interesting to see Cuz taking later resets to try to help his laners get resets, which I think is something that actually in the games that T1 have lost has been abused more, because you'll have the other jungle getting back on the map, and then they'll play the 2v2 out, and then Cuz will just kind of see the pressure and leave. I also think that I made a lot of comparisons when I was preparing this with C9, just because I think that of the four teams, right, you have the two teams that will play more for bot lane, and you have the two teams that will not, which are Jingdong and G2. Also, I'm wondering, because you said you think G2 with caps. I think we should just define this now? Are we talking about the G2 that's going to play in summer? Are we assuming that they'd attend this MSI, or do we think that the G2 that played all spring would attend this MSI?
The G2 with Perks at the bot lane and Caps as the mid laner, because I do believe that is the stronger composition.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Well, why don't we do both? Yeah, why don't we do both then? Because we saw the other G2, but we don't know this one. Yeah, it's all hypothetical anyway, so why not?
Of course. Okay. Yeah, I think that you'd have to also take into consideration that they'd be going back to their old roles, but I think that they were better at those anyway. So yeah, if that's the case, then I think I would agree with her that G2 would be the best if we're assuming that they could just slot back into their roles in terms of where they were before. Arguably, you can say that there's some kind of buff effect for G2 where they are able to just kind of go back into where they were after having not played it. It's everything is new again. Everything feels fresh. They're really motivated to play more games as bot and mid, right? These types of things. But I would say that they're probably a bit stronger than this T1, just because I think T1 make a lot of mistakes with, I like to call it the Mata effect, right? Because if you consistently look at every team that Mata has played for, they take really greedy recalls. They stay on the map just a little bit longer.
Sure.
And they end up overextending in the play, looking for something a little bit more. And I think part of this is just those plays can be effective, right? Because if everyone is recalling late, or if the enemy team takes staggered recalls, then you can make a collapse play on them, right? Anything like that, just by staying on the map a little bit longer. And you'll see Kana and Cuz do these plays a lot in sides. So I think that, but they also get punished for them, right? Which is a little bit more of a coin flip. Whereas I think G2 is really, really good at synchronized recalls and consistently punishing it this. If you watch the Mad Lion series, I remember there was the moment where Aroma was overextended on Renekton and the rest of his team recalled, and you had them barely down bot lane, and they ended up losing that game, but that play was something it's really consistently see from G2. So I think that because of that interaction, we'd see G2 being able to punish that kind of thing more in mid game. And I think that SKT aren't the team that is going to play super, super aggressively and blow them out like Mad Lions did as well in the early game. So
yeah.
Okay, why don't we move then to talk about Jingdong then? We'll set up all the teams and then we'll try and do all the in-depth interactions. So the interesting thing about the Jingdong argument, I'll start with you for this one, Kelsey, is I'll fully admit, I alluded to basically going into this episode, I'm kind of a hater. I think Jingdong's good, but I actually still think TES is the best team in China. I even think they should have won that final. I think there's about 10 different ways they win that final. And this is one of the only, Infinity War style realities in which they don't win that final. And some of it's down to some very weird stuff. So where do you come down on this one, Kelsey? I mean, also Ashley kind of alluded as well. She felt like Top's the better team. So where do you come down on this one?
So I think something that's really interesting across all four of the finals that I looked at was support counterpick. It ended up being really huge, right? And so from that lens, TES couldn't win just because they don't have this flexibility in the support roles in either Yanja or Chicho. So the fact that you have Lumao, who's so flexible and able to play the bards, the fiddlesticks, all these things, if support counterpick is going to be so huge in all of these major final series, pivotal final series, then JDG ends up winning just off of that. So I think that that's a really big problem, especially if pushing lanes become bigger and we're going to see more karmas, more stuff like this in the new meta. Then I think TES actually maybe won't do that well. Wouldn't do that well in that meta, depending on their support flexibility. So I think that almost everyone else on that TES team might be better, except for maybe top jungle. I guess so. You should see a better mid, a better AD coming out of TES, and then they can just outplay fights and they have better hands, right? They're gonna win off of that. So yeah, from that perspective, I think TES are a better team, but I actually don't think that unless you have the flexibility in the support role and you have the kind of jungler who's willing to play for these advantages like Kanabi, that they would do that well at this MSI. So
Okay, well, in that case, if we put that preamble in, that also now makes it so that hopefully people think it's less of a heresy if everyone doesn't just pick Jingdong because they're the best Chinese team and China has won most of the last international tournaments. So where are you coming down on this then, Ashley? What's your thoughts on Jingdong?
So if I look at the 4 major regions, I do not doubt in any day of the year that because C9 is currently the best team in NA. I don't think anyone else is going to doubt that.
Sure.
I'm going to say the same thing for
G2. Are a little bit better, you know?
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm not. Also, the same thing.
It's really bullshit. It shouldn't have happened. Go ahead. Keep going.
I say the same thing for G2 with their 3-0 victory. I say the same for T1 in their current iteration. They are a level above Genji. Sure. But I can't. It's just that the particular series against Jingdong versus TES. If you play that series 10 times, I would say that it's almost like 5-5 or 6-4 towards TES. And one thing that people have to remember is Jackie Love, who has really catalyzed the entire team to flourish, only moved into that roster. How many series before?
I think it was maybe 3 before the end of the split or something. It wasn't many.
It was like 2 weeks. So.
So I noticed 2 things. Number one, Jackie Love has always been known to be a bit of a shot caller in IG. And when he came into TES, something seemed to click. And both Jackie Love and the rest of the players were playing much better compared to some parts of the regular split. And also, I know that I have a lot of respect for Karsa. And I know that Karsa had a few low spots during the regular split where people were even doubting, hey, why did they even bring Karsa forward? But
sure,
coming into the later part of the playoffs, he was actually performing super hard. He could play that more tanky late game teamfight champions, and he could also activate the lanes really early on with some of the picks like Lee Sin. So it looked like TES was in an upward trend. So if I think about the MSI and think about the possible scenario of TES continuing to roll off that finals and just scrimming and getting their new teamwork together, then that's why I would say TES would be a stronger team compared to Jingdong Gaming. But if Jingdong Gaming was go into the MSI, I don't know, all the 4 teams at their finals series played in a really weird sense of way, very similarly, playing slightly towards the bot lane and playing almost a bit like Korean, could I say? I didn't see really extreme strategies from any of those teams. What do you think, Kelsey?
Are you talking about all 4 finals or
all 4 of the winning teams of all the finals? Yeah.
You standard and Korean in what way? Because I always kind of struggle to define those.
I think she means not playing anything super unusual. So what do you mean by that? What are you thinking of? What would have made it non-Korean in that sense?
The top lane kind of more absorbing pressure and jungle going around activating the different lanes, and in the end relying on the AD carry, a standard area carry to carry the late game team fights.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, if you think of the best teams in Korea, they basically all have the best AD carries right now. It's not an unfair categorization. What are you going to say, Kelsey?
Yeah. I think actually it was really interesting to see the LPL semifinals into finals because I think most of the teams that made it to playoffs, except for TES, don't have very good bot lanes or AD carries and play more for the top side, right?
So it's just the finals, not the semifinals. Yeah.
I mean, I also still think that they played more for top side. You saw a lot of 2v2 interactions.
Okay.
I guess Karsa is a little strange in how he sees the jungle and how he paths. For example, let me look at the game just so that I get the picks right. There was a situation where in one of the matches where he pathed towards bottom, I think it was game 1. And he ended up going for... sorry, I clicked the wrong thing. He pathed toward the bottom when bot side is going to be more weak side. And he ended up just to play defensively to hover to look for the gank. So he's always trying to anticipate what the enemy jungler is going to do. So he'll path towards the enemy jungler, which is a much riskier way to play because you can get invaded and you can lose your camps. You could just die in river because they have priority and they can move first, stuff like that. So he'll play like towards weak side in his first clear, and then he'll recall and he'll go for like where he wants to play 2v2, which is top side. So like from that perspective, it kind of looks like they were playing a bit towards bottom. I think also just like GES had a very huge advantage in bot lane against most teams. Except for the fact that they couldn't play for support counterpick. And it was really kind of weird that they put Chocho in when they'd been having like some success against Yu Yanja, even though Yu Yanja like misplayed the semifinal. So I think that was a little bit awkward for them as well. But I think that in general, like you're seeing, it's really weird to describe Zoom, because I would say he is a blind pick carry player. And by that, I mean like his pool very much resembles that of an absorbing pressure top laner, right? Which is like the Gangplanks and the Orns. But he'll play like really aggressively on those picks, and he'll just end up being able to carry fights with them. And then you also have, and this also suits like Kanavi's champion pool very well, because he can just like have the CC setup from something like an Ornn and play something like Graves that just does pure DPS or is able to one-shot people. And then you have like, for example, the Ornn Olaf combo, stuff like that, where they can like just do a ton of damage, and then Ornn gets accelerated off of, or Olaf gets accelerated off of the Ornn CC. So it's kind of a weird way that they will play the top side. But it's very much like still like top jungle 2v2, I think, is the big highlight of that team. And then you have like Luma, who's able to do support counterpick, and Loken is just like chilling in lane. And Luma will like go all over the map and make plays, or kind of help stabilize mid, because I would say Yagao is very limited in what he can do by himself. So I think that those types of things are like, that's how I would say JDG plays to top side. I would also say that G2 are really constrained in how they played before. They will probably play more to bot side with the Perks team, but with the Caps bot lane team, then they would play more to top side and have Caps like play Ezreal, Yuumi, like these types of lanes. So yeah.
Right, let's pivot then. Let's talk about G2 since you brought them up there. Ashley, you've basically already said, but this is the distinction that we've made from what Kelsey said. If they did the swap back, which they are going to do for the summer split of Perks is the AD carry again and Caps is the mid laner, you actually were tipping that to be the best team at this tournament. So if we do that first, what would you anticipate from that type of a G2? I mean, listen, I know they've just smashed all the Korean teams that you loved for the last year and a half, so obviously you must have a lot of respect for them, right?
I guess that's a part of that. And by the way, like when it comes to like specific, like in a matchup and insight into the games, Kelsey's probably a better person to provide all the insights. But
we still appreciate your thoughts though.
So it's just that like I think Perks is like this crush the other mid laner type of mid laner, while for Caps, even though he was a decent LEC bot laner, I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say that he was like a game differentiator making bot laner compared to Perks. Yeah,
it's very.
Seems like even they agree. So I think you're on safe ground there. Yeah.
Like Perks was always like even at near the end of 2019, Perks did feel slightly different compared to other standard AD carries, the way he positioned himself much more aggressively compared to perhaps other AD carries like with Sire and stuff. But I would say that he was the better playmaker for G2 and a more reliable one too. And like it just, I don't know, it will also depend on meta. Like, does it serve G2 to play with like, Perks completely dominating his lane and almost letting Caps and Mickey X play safe until it goes to the late game team fights? Or is it better for Perks to go to the bot lane and Caps to be a bit of a roamer? Because when I think of Caps, I think of like him roaming around, activating other lanes. I think of Pyke and I think LeBlanc. But overall, I would just say that G2, when I look at the peak performance, was better with Perks on the bot lane, simply because I think the AD carry role suited Perks much better. And even though like people would comment that, especially in the later part of 2019, G2 was playing more towards bot side. I think G2 had more flexibility on where they wanted to focus in terms of the lane, or like where they wanted to apply pressure at specific time of the game, and they were very creative with that. And I think one of the things that the Korean teams especially lack is being able to adapt to those changes, like within the game, not by like. And I do expect T1 to have great analysis and them to also look into G2 as well as C9 and Jingdong Gaming if we head into the MSI. But are the players who have been playing in the LCK for the whole split react to those creative, like, map pressures or skirmishes on a whim? That's where I would have doubt about G2 versus any LCK team matchup in general. And also they're a good team, in general.
Yeah, what do you think, Kelsey? Obviously, let's do the Perks AD carry one first.
When you look at G2, one of their strengths, I think, is like having really well-defined like set plays that they can execute in a variety of different situations. So, for example, something that's really consistent is Jankos will lean mid and Perks will get the crash off or Perks or Caps, whoever is mid. It doesn't really matter because they did this team on both iterations, this set play on both iterations of the roster. We'll get the crash off first, we'll get the reset, and then they'll push out again after he comes back to lane and make the first play on the map off of that, right? Because he'll get first roam timer off of being like the first reset. So they'll consistently do that kind of really, really simple interaction. Or like the set play that I was talking about earlier, where they make sure everyone has synchronized recalls. They like rush to a lane on the map, and they get someone, or they get a pick off of that and set it up like that. Or they rush to an objective and they set out vision, and then they like stand back in fog and wait for people to walk in. So I think that's like really the strength of G2, is that kind of cohesion. And where it kind of breaks down with the difference between Caps and Perks on the roster is just like Caps' ability to position in a team fight on an AD carry.
Sure.
And I think that has a lot to do with just like, I remember the composition that they ran against Origin, I believe, where they had Aphelios, so they had like Zillion and just like and Nico, which like with the glacial augment,
it was all to prop up Caps, right?
Yeah, it was like just to create zones for him to not die, and he still like, if there was one fight where Perks didn't use the Zillion ulti on him, right, he would die, they would lose. So just like these types of setups that are kind of required to make him work in that environment, that I feel like Perks is way more kind of self-sufficient in his positioning. Like Caps likes champions that can blink and jump on your face, right? That's what makes him like a very talented and creative mid laner. And AD carry doesn't really play like that. So like that was one of his big adaptation failures. So that's why I think like G2's early game is still not the strongest, because again, they'll have these set plays that can break down if people predict them. But they have to rely on their mid to late game set plays, which tend to be like way more creative, way more on the same page, and way harder to kind of foresee, because you're like in the game, you're making your own game plans. A whole bunch of different factors have taken place, and you don't necessarily see the angles they see at that point. But they can't make those consistently work if they don't have an AD carry that can position well. Sure. So that's why I find that like there is a big difference in how they play with in their ability to win with Perks as an AD carry versus Caps, and that's like kind of the fundamental difference for me.
Yeah, I will completely agree with that, and add on the fact that that's like the fundamental difference between the mid lane and the bot lane. Even if I'm spelling something obvious out, like for the mid lane, you have to go with, hey, I might die, but I'll still go for the kill. But for AD carry, you simply can't have that luxury. You have to go with you have to aim for the zero death. That's what I feel like a bot laner, unless they're playing something crazy like Pyke AD carry, I don't know. Like that's what the mindset a bot laner has to go in. Try to finish the game with zero death, and Perks is good at it. Like even Sven is so good at it. Like with this insane KDA, and I think in that mindset required for their given role, Perks is much suited for a bot laner role compared to Caps. Just like a different characteristic of a player.
Sure. I'll actually even add some information from Kelsey in 2015 that I quoted in my article where she said, compensating for gaps in playstyle is often the unspoken goal of team design, but the roots of these player flaws aren't immediately apparent. So all I'll say is this. G2 love, by the way, when they come on all the shows they go on, to like downplay every weakness they have, to max every little drip they get out of whoever does the role swap, right? And they make it sound like there's no problems. All I'm going to say is this, G2, you showed us in those playoffs what the problems with Caps were, because you had two choices. You could have just played standard and you would have lost, or you could have played like you did. You won, congrats, but in doing so, you made it obvious that you were propping this guy up. You didn't just do what you did with Perks, where he just played the best AD carry champions, picked them when possible, and fucking won the game. In fact, I think an interesting detail to me in the world where they're going to do the role swap back is I even saw it was somewhat intimated somewhere, I forget where, that Perks even felt like last year they should have played around him more. I'm guessing once everything went to shit in the summer or something. So, because obviously like he's one of the shot calling voices, he certainly did a very good job in that regard as an AD carry as far as I can tell. So I could absolutely see them when they switch back with this role now. They would play through bot, I imagine, especially if the champions are there in the meta. So, and that would be quite interesting. Yeah. Should we jump on to... Go on.
Yeah, I mean, I think also just one thing that we haven't really touched on about when G2 like kind of played toward bot in the final, because that's something that Ashley brought up, right? Which is that was like sort of unique. Is that like I think that was a really unique situation based on Fnatic's support restriction.
I mean, it was literally said, as far as I know, on talk shows that G2 wanted Fnatic to pick champions like Aphelios, so then they would put the Tahm Kench with it, instantly taking Hylissang out of the game. Yeah. And then simultaneously, obviously their picks were intended to be ones that Fnatic would never have played against.
Yeah, like so for example, the Janna, the Lulu, like stuff like that comes out is like only really pickable into like if they don't pick Nautilus, which is a really, really common blind pick, right? If they pick something like Braum or Tahm Kench, which is also what happened in the Jingdong series, in the Jingdong final, right? Whereas that they picked Braum blind. So like those types of situations, I think, are way less likely to occur against the teams at MSI, right, than Fnatic. Like Fnatic was kind of unique in that sense. Yes. So I don't expect that to be something that they do with Caps in the bot lane. Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's do Cloud9, and then after that, what we'll do is we'll just do a little free-for-all where we just contrast different things between the teams, what the strengths are and stuff like that. So for Cloud9, right, the first thing I think everyone has to tell the rest of the group is how strong do you actually think Cloud9 would be out of these four teams? Ashley, do you dare wade into this minefield?
It's so difficult to judge because Cloud9 haven't had any real challenge throughout the LCS, but I think that can also become a weakness for Cloud9 in a sense, because I wonder if this iteration of Cloud9 has had enough experience of playing from behind, because so many of like the decisions they make in terms of like where are we gonna go pressure the map, or hey, we just gonna randomly make a very greedy tower dive or go like try to make this like 2v3 skirmishes work, is coming from a team who has become so confident in being in one step lead across any other team. So sure. I wonder if they are going to be able to play from behind. And another thing that I noticed is, all the players have like a relatively set roles in here. Like, Blabber being like this super aggressive player, like activating all the different lanes. Sven is a very reliable AD carry. Like we have already talked about him having a very consistent KDA in the first half of the split. And Niski is also a bit more of an activator for Blabber and Sven, I feel. And I wonder if those individual lanes are going to crush if they are faced with significantly, like, I don't want to say better because I don't want to, like a very well performing mid laners and bot laners.
How about better than decent?
Better than they're used to. Okay, I'll put it this way: they're used to winning lanes, but what happens when they have to play with losing lanes and then deal
Sure.
with it. Like, can Niski deal with the situation where he goes against maybe Faker, who is known as a very good laner, who is pushing the lane in, like, even in 8 minutes and denying him all the CS? Like, do they have any experience adapting to all those situations? So that's where I will be more skeptical about Cloud9.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thoughts, Kelsey?
Cloud9 are really interesting to me. Like, I reviewed the EG series before this, and I just realized also that they end up getting away with a lot of stuff just because, like, a lot of the teams that they play against just freak out when they just walk into River, like, face check straight up, right? It's like, holy shit, they're just walking there, right? They don't give a fuck, right? They're very kind of unassuming, and then people just is like, oh, okay, if they're going, they must know something that we don't. We have to back out, even though we have numbers advantage, or even though we have like this setup. It reminds me of, like, C9 are very much trying to play like kind of a poor man's FPX. And the reason why I say a poor man's FPX is because I think, like, the really big highlight of FPX was kind of the mid jungle support synergy. And I think that they don't quite have, like, the jungle support synergy as much, but they're very much trying to play around mid jungle the same way like FPX would. And that I mean that they just, like, he's constantly going to mid to free up Niski so that he can, like, go all over the place. Niski's even said that he wants to play like Doinby. Niski as a player, like, from his time in EU, was always, like, the very vocal, like, I'm going to lose lane, but I'm going to play a TF, and I'm going to port everywhere. So I think it really suits him to, like, kind of model himself after Doinby, who perhaps controversially isn't the best laner. I say controversially because apparently that's a controversial opinion. But, like, I think it makes a lot of sense for him to kind of model himself that way. And then it also helps that Zoe's really, really broken, and he's a good Zoe player. But I think if you're looking at, like, them just kind of walking into things, and some of the plays where EG tried to counter it, right? I think EG actually came the closest. They had one game where they beat them, and I think that they had a very good read on what C9 were doing. And they set up River, and I ended up comparing this a lot to what Jingdong were doing, because Jingdong did this a lot in their semifinal, not their final, where they would set up the vision first, and then G2 also did this as well. And I was, like, constantly thinking of this as bad, but I think there's a lot of merit to it situationally, where they set up the vision first, then they take their recalls, and then they let the enemy team, like, who has recalled first and come back out on the map, like, clear out all the vision. And then once they're coming out, they end up, like, collapsing on them and killing them. And EG were doing plays like this against C9 in the game that they won. And I think that the fact that you have Jingdong and G2, who both, like, do this kind of thing very consistently, and the way Mad was countering it was they just, like, ran through River, and they knew that G2 would be, like, in their jungle waiting for that to collapse, and that just, like, got the jump on Yankos or something like that. So I think that type of thing is something that C9 aren't quite at yet. They're just, like, gonna walk into the vision and then wait and get collapsed on, and then Blabber was getting picked off doing that type of thing. So that's why I think, like, arguably Jingdong and G2 in the mid game have a favorable matchup against them. But in the early game, I think that they won't necessarily punish the way that C9 like to play. So C9 can still get an advantage over G2 that can be game winning. I know this is, like, really convoluted, but I think that G2's early game is bad. So, like, C9 can still actually end up upsetting them, at least the caps iteration of the roster, especially since they don't play that well around bot lane, and C9, like, love bot lane, right?
Sure.
Part of the reason why they don't have, like, the best jungle support synergy is that they play really hard for the 2v2. So I think that that's, like, potentially a situation where C9 could end up upsetting either Jingdong or G2 early. But it depends on whether or not they'd be able to get the kind of lead. Because I don't think Jingdong has individually enough talented players in mid to take advantage of of what C9 do. And I think that G2's, like, bot lane is a little bit unstable. and they can't rely on C9 blind picking stuff, even though C9 would blind pick Tom Kench if Senna is available because they love that shit. And I'm assuming Senna will be banned. So, or just not picked or prioritized because of the changes.
Kelsey, I would love to ask this question because there's something I was always curious about. I was always curious about how much scrims impact, like the availability of scrim and the pool of teams you can play against impact the team's performance. And I would say LCK and LPL had a competitive split, but they also scrim each other quite frequently. Does it hurt NA a lot that Cloud9 and NA overall don't have any other major scrim partners from other regions?
Yeah, I would also say that just the availability of competition in solo queue hurts them too. All that, like they're just the accessibility to. So that's like the concern, right? Is that they don't play strong enough players. But I think there's like a lot of visualization that has to go into being a player from a region like NA. Like you have to make a lot of visualization leaps in terms of understanding matchups because no one is going to play the like Zoe Syndra matchup like Showmaker and Chovy, right? They're not going to play that in NA solo queue. You're not going to go into NA solo queue and get to play like people who understand the matchup well. So you have to end up watching like ProView or the streams to really visualize how that goes and to like practice it or simulate it kind of in your head so that you can get good enough to be like on that level and go to the competition and not get destroyed, which is a really difficult thing to do. Like, I don't think I could do that. So like the players in NA who are trying to do that and maybe having some success is like really impressive, but it also tells you like kind of the uphill battle that they have to face, right? To do well at an international competition.
Sure. Well, since we talked about Cloud9, why don't we just contrast some of the Cloud9 elements as we did in some of these chats, and then from there we can just go wherever we feel like. So one area that I actually would have my concerns for Cloud9 is like, I'll give the positive and the negative of it. So one of the big deals as to why Cloud9 was so dominant in North America was that they were able to completely integrate Blabber. Like as much as people in the past, I think quite fairly, saw him as like a very extreme coin flip player. Like he either coin flips and wins the whole game for you, or he can just give up like ridiculous deaths. I mean, in some ways he was kind of like the Caps of jungle in that sense, except the difference is Caps was also an extremely good player behind that. He didn't have the experience. You've seen now, like I've kind of sold on the idea that Nisqy does have some sort of special talent for working with his junglers, because his movement, you can tell sometimes the junglers know where they're coming, all the stuff that they're doing, but he just knows where to be, almost like to like allow that guy to back off or to go in after him and give him the follow-up that another mid laner wouldn't. I mean, Bjergsen's an obvious example, I think. So on the upside, I do think, for example, if they sent the role-swapped G2 that will play in the summer with Caps in the mid lane, I would bet money that actually Nisqy and Blabber would get some kills off on Caps. Like he would play greedy, he would play like as if his jungler was there, he'd be up and they'd jump out of the bush and get him kills. Like I've no doubt they would do that. I just don't actually know whether that would even win you the game though, because like first of all, G2 has played from behind so much. They used to be able to sustain a few of those deaths anyway, because it's kind of the price you take for having Caps as your mid. So I do think they would actually, I think that's where it would be interesting for me if they played the G2 role swap team, because I feel like they could get leads actually. Everyone's thinking, like Ashley says, they'll start from behind in most of the games. I think G2's a team they could maybe even start up on. Then you throw in Kanavi on Jingdong. I mean, he is more of like the late game jungler. He's like the power farm. I'm sure he certainly must be a player after your own heart in the clear love mold to some degree, invoking that name. But, you know, he's not someone who's going to just try and match the enemy jungler all the time. So what do you think of this, Kelsey? Where do you come down on this? How would the jungle matchup work for the C9?
I actually think, like I said, that C9 could get leads against G2 and in Jingdong potentially. I think, though, that like the one thing that's really in JDG's favor for like a theoretical MSI and that could actually tip is that I think the meta is just like too perfect for them. Like it went towards them in the playoffs and it's gone even more towards them now. I think that just like being able to play Graves in these power farm junglers and then having like jungle XP scale even better so that you can kind of be on par with laners like even up to level 14 or some dumb shit like this, right? Like you can, and then end up like denying really hard and just having that jungle difference, the XP difference really stick, actually just favors them very, very well. I think the where that'll come down is that if like Blabber, like that doesn't suit Blabber, right? I would say, and it doesn't suit Cuz. Like I would say that the jungle meta doesn't suit those two the most. I would say that Jankos is like very flexible.
Yes.
And Kanabi is obviously very happy with the changes. So I think that's like where you would see like those two teams kind of swing up. And it would just depend on whether or not Yagao can consistently kind of keep mid push in favorable matchups, because that's always my biggest question mark with JDG. And he managed to do well against Knight, who I would argue is right now the best mid laner in the world. So, and Knight had a terrible series, but I think that's like something that like if all he has to do is keep push, right? All he has to do is push it out. And I think that's JDG could like win the tournament just off of meta swing. But I think that again, like it would really come down to whether or not they can get enough of an acceleration off of playing the 2v1 against Yagao. And if they can get enough of an acceleration off of playing the 2v1 against Yagao, that the way that JDG set up the map or the way that JDG like wait for them to walk in before they collapse doesn't do anything, then I think that they can win off of JDG, but I would favor JDG overall. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Ashley, what do you think of jungle matchup? Perhaps you can specialize it to Kaz if you want. What do you think?
Yeah, I would give a bit more credit to Kaz because we know that Kaz has been playing it's supportive a good word here, but Kaz has been playing in a certain way in T1, but he has had different phases during,
He's certainly been the very mechanical jungler previously, yeah, of course.
Yeah, and like last year, he was known as that Karthus player who would just farm and just take all the camps a lot and then do all the counter jungling. And he also had a very good Grace performance. So if T1 practices around this new meta with like a scaling XP, and is Kaz another thing about Kaz, I think he's a very team oriented, adaptable player. Like Jankos has shown this again and again for multiple splits that he can be a very adaptable, flexible player who can try a variety of playstyle. But I think Kaz can also has the potential in him. So if T1 reads the meta well, and if T1 practice around it, I think Kaz can be also a great carry jungler. Even though I will also say that Kanabi has proven himself and had practice in being the carry jungler throughout the split. So
I just think Kaz still has a lot of Kaz moments. Like in a meta that's where the jungle role is like more like outplaying the other guy because you have pushing lanes and you can force him out of his jungle and force him to react to you. I see him struggling a little bit more with that, but I don't know, maybe because there's still like a lot of weird things that Kuz does specifically around like his back some resets early that I think would make him kind of disadvantaged.
Seems like a bit of a nervous guy, right? I mean, if people even remember back when he was a long Jew and people made fun of him a lot, like this is the thing I think people misunderstood. Like when people said he was a bad player, like skill-wise, he clearly was very good. That's why he was at so high in Korean solo queue for so many years and why people kept giving him a try, like why he got on T1 now. But it's just that he would make like inexplicable int type moves. And that was what people were dissing. It wasn't that, he was like one of those old Rocks Tigers junglers before Peanut that no one even remembers the name of. Like he was clearly someone who had the talent. It's just, I mean, a jungle's another role it's hard to be irresponsible with.
Yeah. So I think that's more my concern about Kuz is like his early game decision making rather than his ability to like be a mechanical strong carry. I think he can do that, but
okay.
Go
on.
Jingdong Gaming versus T1 matchup, I would say that I would rely on Faker over Yagao. And I would also say that T1 does have a stronger bot lane compared. Huh?
They both have nearly undefeated LeBlancs. Oh my gosh.
And
they should have undefeated LeBlancs. Yeah, exactly.
I would also say that T1 has a better, more reliable bot lane compared to Jingdong Gaming. So what do you think about Kana versus Zoom top lane matchup?
I think Zoom is kind of a disgusting player right now. And by that, I mean he's just like really, really strong. A lot of LPL playoffs were really, really kind of like top difference across the board. And the fact that JDG came out on top of that, I think it's not a coincidence. Like this guy is able to carry on stupid champs like GP and Ornn, right? Yeah, he just like can set up and control a fight like that. So I think he's like really strong compared to like someone like Kana, who's I would say that sometimes I feel like Kana makes really strange mistakes in wave management still that are somewhat required Cuz to play the way he does. So like for me, it's really difficult to look at that relationship and see if it's like Cuz making decisions with his resets or him overstaying because Kana's like trying to get his wave in. And there are a lot of instances where I see like stuff like that happening. So yeah, for me, I feel like it's just kind of easier for like I think it should still be Zoom favored. I think Kana has like a lot of promise, but he's still in his rookie year. And he still has a little bit to learn, and that's why it's just like a lot easier for them to play around bot. Like bot's way more consistent. So I can see this matchup being like really polarizing. It'll depend a lot on kind of, I don't know why I'm so obsessed with the support role. I think it will depend a lot on like who has the more impact there from that position. So it might be even like a red side favored because both of these teams have shown that they're willing to hold support pick till late and counter pick like that. So I think it's an interesting matchup for sure. But I think, yeah, like Yagao is definitely the biggest question mark for me for JDG. But that's also why I felt like TS would win too.
Sure.
And they didn't.
Okay, so one of the things I think is interesting about this is like I like the way you characterize Zoom there because actually like there's another player who's after my own heart. So in a meta where if you can, and all the top laners at this tournament would show it, if you can play on, you probably should. It's a fucking amazing champion right now. What I actually like about Zoom is basically, you can remember this, Kelsey, back when Flame was in the metas where in theory you didn't have true carries. Like the idea of a carry was like Renekton and you were just playing that into like Shyvana or fucking Trundle or something or Dr. Mundo. Like that was about as close as you could come to a carry. The joke I always thought was Flame never got the memo he wasn't the carry anymore. He used to just play all of those champions, super up in lane, try and win the CS battle, try and get like, you could have a solo kill with some of these champions back then. He did everything but that, even called the jungler up. So I like the fact that Zoom essentially, I like the way you say it there. He plays the pool of what you'd think is the absorb pressure impact top laner, but he actually plays it as if he's the main carry of the team, and he certainly goes for solo kills, as you saw. So I have to say, in this particular matchup, not only is he already probably the best top laner in the world, I mean, spoiler, he was in contention for that last year. They just didn't make it. And then everyone forgets because the Shy like did the Men in Black thing and made everyone think he was just sick all year at Worlds. Like he wasn't when it was back there in the playoffs. Like, he was having his real fucking problems in Summer Split last year. So to me, one of the other problems a lot of the teams will have at this tournament, if it took place, is Zoom's just a better version of what they're all trying to be. Like, they're all going to play the same champion pool. Like, there's nobody, except if Wonder did some kind of, like, really weird matchup draw or something that no one's played. I can't really see how anyone's going to get an edge in top lane.
Yeah, I think it's also, like, really interesting because I would say that he's not really the Jace player, right? He's not really, like, the Lucian guy, but he's just, like, really, really comfortable in a meta with these kinds of champions, and he can carry in this kind of meta, so...
Oh, actually, one thing we should definitely do, since you've obviously alluded to it already, Kelsey's numerous times made her feelings clear about Yagao, is obviously let's do the mid lane matchup. I mean, this is another area that would be very interesting for me because first of all, you have Faker, who's obviously the icon of the mid lane, but I think we have some very interesting stuff we can talk about that. And then secondly, whether it's caps or whether it's perks, the very unusual thing, and I think this is one of the things that made G2 so fun last year, was they arguably had the best mid laner in the world in their team when they had caps. So Banger's Knight isn't there, so we don't have to risk looking foolish, Kelsey. And if this really did happen, we just said he was the best player. Because listen, I've done that before all these finals that he keeps losing in the semi-finals. So it's all right. Well, luckily, we don't have to do that. We can save that for a future failure, perhaps. Right? In this world, what do you think here, Ashley? Because I noticed when you were talking about Faker earlier, I need to press you on this, right? Because everyone sees the name Faker and they all think of like LeBlanc outplayers, Z outplayers, like stomping out. They basically think of stuff from season 3 and then occasional moments afterwards. The problem I have is this. I try to be very fair when I look at players and almost remove the nameplate and don't let the reputation overwhelm what I'm seeing. And I'm not being a hater, but I don't feel like that's been the Faker I've seen for years now. I feel like in these more modern versions of SKT where everyone else changed around him, he became more of just like the stable mid laner, like just the guy who plays the mage. Like if Azir is available, obviously he's going to play it. Like I don't really know that I see like the pop-off player as much. I don't see him as like a crazy mid laner. How do you see Faker at the moment? How do you think he would do in this tournament?
I think part of it is because Faker does admit that like, his mechanics isn't like the top, like some parts of his mechanics isn't as top notch as like his peak prime, because at his peak prime he was just amazing. But also I will say that SKT, especially in the later years, have always favored that, okay, so mid lane is kind of doing their thing, and like top lane is kind of absorbing pressure, and the top lane is going to be that reliable carry that is going to win the game for us.
Sure.
And I think Faker also kind of adapted to the role, because we have seen like flashes of him playing things like Akali when she was viable, or LeBlanc, and then being that assassin / like, hey, I'm gonna skirt the size of your, like as you try to take the dragon or Baron, I'm gonna skirt size around so you can't get like a proper positioning, like doing all the things that assassin needs to do. I've seen Faker carry that role. It's just that it seems that from the way that T1 is interpreting their own team style as well as the current meta, they don't have to have Faker as that super carry assassin. So we often see him at Azir. He's pretty good on Azir, or any other champion that you can expect on the meta. But I also think that depending on the meta or the specific matchup, Faker has the possibility to pick those assassin champions and then go back to that role, which I've seen him excel in multiple parts of the playoffs and the regular split. So I think Faker is really good in that he can play any role. He can't do the Malphite mid doing B style, but
sure.
He can be the stable.
Some would say no one should, but
Don't tell him that, and we'll see like Malphite in the next game.
Sure.
He's just really flexible that can play a variety of champions for a variety of role, and right now T1 seems to favor for their main carry to be Teddy more than 50% of times. So I think that's why you see the Faker that is now.
Okay. Thoughts, Kelsey?
And yeah, I think he's kind of been the player for a while, where he's just the mid laner, right? He's able to just do as much as he can. I think it was like 2016, I wrote an article that was called like How to Win Mid Lane in 2016, and it was about the final from Worlds. And it was just like him versus
Crown?
It was Crown, and just like his experience where he was consistently able to get the right timings to pressure the map, and the ability to kind of like hold the mid lane matchup and to just keep the wave where he wanted it to be without jungle pressure, right? So it was this highlighting this kind of strength that he had rather than mechanical ability. And I think so he's kind of been that player for a while. I think the thing about Yagao is that he tries to be that player too, but for him it almost feels like he goes into every season and he's just going to pick a favorite champion and he's going to win on that champion really consistently and have a lot of trouble on everything else. So I think like last season it was Zoe. This season it's LeBlanc. And LeBlanc doesn't even feel like it should be the kind of champion that Yagao plays. But he's had a lot of success with it and just been able to consistently play out the matchups well. So for me, it comes down to kind of probably like Zoe, LeBlanc, Syndra will be really high priority in this matchup. And like probably LeBlanc ends up getting banned. They're forced into a situation with like a Azir Corki matchup, or Syndra, LeBlanc can probably consistently be banned, and then a Azir Corki matchup comes up, and then you have Faker getting ahead. So yeah, I see mid being really the easy way for them to get an advantage, even if it is just like a 1v1, because neither team really plays through mid. They just play off of mid having pressure. And obviously Faker is the favorite to get that. So it really then just depends on whether or not they get support counterpick, which is, again, I think that side's going to be really strong. And top can set up enough plays for Kanavi to be strong and consistently invade.
Okay. I mean, this is also where it would be interesting to me which G2 we're talking about, because if we send Perks, I mean, anyone who saw the final of LEC knows he can play both sides of the Azir Corki matchup. He was absolutely comfortable as fuck doing that. In fact, he basically dared them to pick Azir. They did. Then if you look, if they sent Caps, here's the thing. If I wanted this team to win the tournament, I would want the Caps mid lineup. The problem is, I don't know that that's the meta I want Caps in. Like Caps, I want him on champions where he can do all this playmaking, because the thing I love about Caps is he doesn't just go for the play that like you think, oh my God, I didn't even know someone can do that. It's like you don't think someone even should do it. That he almost has that faker quality to him where it's like almost the level of disrespect of how some of the players he goes for is what will catch even pros off. Like you could tell when Koreans played that G2, some of the times they were just like, what the fuck is this? Like no one would do this back in Korea. Like Chovy just plays for lane. Like the other, fucking BDD. I mean, he was kind of dead that year, but whatever. Like, these players are not going to play super risky. They're going to play to get the CS edge, to have push in lane and maybe work with the jungler. That's it. They're not going to do some of the ridiculous things that Caps would do, which if you even talk to his teammates, so again, he's on the opposite. That's why I said like Blabber's like the Caps of jungle, because it's Yankos who's like the parent, like the dad, the dad instincts parent who has to like dive and grab the kid. It's Yankos who's doing that when it's Caps in mid. Like he's just going around going, where's he fucking going to go next? He's just trying to preempt where that guy's going to go and either get a kill or int. So I would love to see that Caps, but I think that would almost be a non-factor in this meta, surely. Like if anything, you want just the perk style.
So I think there's an argument to be made that you should always just play through mid jungle but there are different ways to do that. So like there's the way that we've been talking about with Yagao and Faker, which is that they just push out and then the jungle uses priority to invade and win the 1v1, right? And then there's what I would say is probably like the Yankos Caps and the Blabberniski way, which is like, we're going to fight for the priority by playing champions that skirmish really well, and then we're going to invade as two and fuck up the enemy jungler 2v1, right? Like this type of playstyle. Sure. So I think there are ways to make that work, but you have to still just be playing for the jungle matchup with that in mind. And I think that G2 have, when they've played that lineup before, have played for side lanes, and C9 have played kind of for mid itself. So mid to bot in particular. So I think like if they can adapt that style to invade and still control the enemy jungle, then they can play really well with that kind of focus. So it really depends on I think it can be successful. Yeah.
Okay. What about give us some thoughts, Ashley, on the T1 bot lane then? You've already kind of set it up already that like understandably they play for that lane. What do you think that they would do in this kind of a tournament with the other bot lanes we have on offer here?
Nothing exceptional. We wouldn't see Syndra bot lane from Teddy. No, definitely. It's already quite evident that T1, because I have been told that T1 does play mage champions on scrim now and then. It's not like Teddy doesn't have a lot of proficiency in the bot lane, and he is quite a flexible player. But at the same time, it is quite evident through their press conference after the finals in multiple occasions that they believe that the way to approach the current meta is to play a solid AD carry. Could be a Varus, could be a Misfortune, could be anything else, Aphelios, to play that traditional AD carry into the bot lane, and Teddy excels at it. But if I had to think about it, effort, even though I also think he is a good support player, I wouldn't see him as someone who is pulling out something radical such as Bard. He doesn't have a massively high champion pool or a pocket pick compared to other top supports in the world, and surprisingly, I haven't seen him on the Tom Catch that much this split. And especially on international tournaments, I've seen effort taking that half a step too far and often getting caught out there seems to be the habit that Effort makes. It could be the nerves, it could be something else, but it can be a bit more too mispositioned sometimes, especially in the 2v2 lane, and get himself caught out. So I don't know how Effort is going to play in this international tournament because
He
last.
did.
Pardon?
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I was just gonna say he did play like the Karma, right? So
Yeah, but when I think of him, I actually often think of him as Nautilus. That's me.
He's someone that you can't, and he's also played Bard, I think, in playoffs, right?
Yes, once.
Yeah.
So I think, like, he's someone that you won't blind mages against, so that's really important. And then he's someone that you won't, and if he can play the mages and he's been willing to pull them out, then he's someone that you can't blind like Braum against. So that's really, I think, all that's required. I would say that Lu Mao is like slightly more unpredictable and slightly more interesting, but like at the end of the day, I think those are the two most important things. As long as you can get punished for blinding one of those things, then I think that you're an effective support player compared to something like Hillsong, who's not going to punish you for blinding one of those things, or as we saw, the TES supports didn't really punish for blinding one of those things.
I think actually you could make the case that bot lane is actually the most interesting lane at this tournament, because this is the lane where a whole bunch of the teams, I'm thinking G2, especially if they have Cap still, and obviously Jingdong, have some weaknesses there relative to the rest of the map. Meanwhile, C9, in theory, that was like their main lane that they're putting up against everyone, saying, like, this is fucking sick, it's the best. But then again, you have to go internationally with that, and then the T1, I mean, it's just pretty stable. It's just a very good bot lane. So where do you come down on this, Kelsey? How would the bot lanes actually interact? I mean, do you think, for example, what you alluded to before, would the Lamau support picks be relevant in this meta that we'd be going into?
Yeah, I think basically so bot lane kind of evolved such that, at the start of the season, the general consensus around Dragon was give up some early dragons, but then like just the mental state of which I still think is like technically optimal in kind of a computer simulation, but you eventually get to a point where you're down 2 dragons, and just like the mental impact that I think that has on players is kind of underrated.
You feel like you're losing if you aren't.
Yeah, because you're like fighting to get dragons. Like you can't make trades anymore, right?
Right.
So you can make trades in the beginning, but suddenly they have 2 dragons and you can't make trades on the other side of the map. And a lot of the way most of these teams play is to make like really, really smart map side trades. So like that ends up limiting you, just that feeling. So early dragons end up just being more prioritized because of the mental advantage, I think, that they give. And that ends up creating a need for like a winning or a pushing bot lane to make that really easy to achieve. And so support counterpick ends up being more important because obviously AD counterpick isn't going to be what decides like who gets pushed in the matchup.
Sure.
So you see teams holding support pick more and more as the season progressed until like the finals where support counterpick ended up being really big. That didn't necessarily mean that like the best bot lane won, because you could still have Loken like an LPL semifinal where everyone played through top, but they still had support counterpick so that they could get priority and the support could roam, and they could set up for like control of the dragon early, even though their AD carry was just like kind of sitting there and clearing waves with Aphelios flamethrowers or whatever the fuck he was doing. You still have this setup with the support creating the priority and creating the ability for your team to make plays around bot lane. So I think that's the difference where you see like the really strong ADs within their regions, like Teddy and Sven, compared to like JDG and G2, who found ways to play around kind of this limitation just by using the flexibility of their support player.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you actually think would be the best bot lane? Who would you actually go for here, Kelsey?
I think Effort is not the best support, but I think they're the best AD. Teddy's the best AD, and they're the best duo lane. in terms of supports that have map impact, I would say like the ones that aren't effort are better.
Okay.
So basically everyone else.
What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts actually specifically on Loken though? Because I noticed you haven't talked about him much, and that's one of those players where like this is just a role that, like, I'm obviously willing to be the bad guy, so I'll just do this for every player in history, and you guys can all just chill out and not get hit. I don't think Loken's that great an AD carry, specifically considering he plays in the fucking LPL. Like, the idea he's an LPL champion, I'm not hating, but he's got to be one of the AD carries to win that's not that good. Like, most of the time, if someone wins the LPL, they're probably an amazing AD carry. So I think he's like a very competent player. I like his career story, he has a cool narrative, but I wouldn't even have had him probably like top 5 AD carries in the LPL. Where do you come down on it, Kelsey?
I think he's the best survive side AD carry player in the LPL.
That is something. That is something, certainly.
It's definitely a skill, right? Because you have to be, like, first of all, I think you have to be very self-aware to be a good survive side player. You have to be, like, kind of at peace with yourself, you know? I'm not going to be the big guy. Like, maybe they might give Puff first team AD carry, but they're really trolling with that.
Yes.
He's just a good survive side player, whatever. But I think in general, you're not going to be the one who gets the recognition. Like Rookie and the Shy are going to get the recognition, and you're just going to chill, and it's going to be a thankless job. And maybe every once in a while, your coach says you did really well with your wave management here. Nice job. The jungle didn't help you, but you didn't fuck up your lane. That's great.
Sure.
So, like it's still a skill, right?
Yeah.
It's like a mental skill, and it's definitely like you have to be really good at holding your lane 2v2. Like, arguably, you could say Faker is a really, really good survive player on top of being like a good carry player.
Sure.
So, I think like that's definitely a skill, and he positions well. He positions conservatively enough in team fights to still manage to DPS like above average. So, like, he's a very solid survive side player. I think that's something that is a little bit underrated, especially when Jingdong, like, they had him on the roster, right? And then last year they put like they had Imp for a while. Forget who the other player was.
Wasn't it like B-Boy or something?
Yeah,
I think he was there as well.
I was thinking it was B-Boy, but I was like, it couldn't possibly be B-Boy. But it was like, yeah, it was actually B-Boy. So they had Imp, and then they had to play way more towards bot lane, right?
Yes, obviously. Yeah.
And so I think that was like a little underrated factor of they were a worse team without Loken. And then TES, I think they just couldn't make it work because 369 and Knight weren't experienced and mature enough to also sort of like carry the game vocally. So like Loken didn't really work with that team. So Loken went back to JDG, and suddenly JDG are really, really successful. So I think that that's something that's a little bit underrated about him, but I don't think like he's a good AD carry overall. Like, he's not Teddy. He's not. I think Sven's better probably, and let me see. Like, Perks is better. Like, he's probably the worst.
Assuming Caps
maybe
doesn't
Caps.
play. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, like Caps. Like, you can argue Caps might be better than him mechanically. He just can't position. So, like, that's kind of the debate. But I think, yeah, it just didn't really seem to matter because Jackie Love is very, very good. Jackie Love is probably better than everyone except for maybe Teddy, who would be at this MSI, and Jackie Love like was just kind of like the sort of unintended boon of TES, where it was like, okay, we don't need a good AD carry to win these games because the Shy is dying 5 times or whatever, but it's just really nice to have. So I think that that's something that is really difficult for me to decide, like, what exactly the impact of AD carry is, because it just feels really low.
I mean, with the exception of the C9 region, it wasn't really that necessary to win the league, as far as I can tell, in most of the other regions.
Yeah. Yep. Like, I think having Teddy be really, really strong was good for T1 for sure, and Teddy's a really impressive player, but I'm just wondering if that is going to be enough for T1 to win, right? Having, like, you would think in a lot of situations, having T1 in a game where people are playing like tank top, like, having a good AD carry should be really, really important, right? But I feel like it's not as important as it should be. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I am more biased towards the impact of AD carry can make on a game simply because I guess 80% of the games that I watch in my time is from LCK. And LCK, because both teams are always focusing towards the AD carry, funneling resource to them and making sure that they position themselves that the AD carry is dealing out all the damage. So often when it goes past 25 minutes, it comes down to the AD carry on whether Death Flash is the wrong way or whether Mystic can 2v5 on Ashe. So, I don't know. I would put a higher fate on Teddy because I think he's an exceptional player. I think he's actually the best player in T1. Quite.
Yeah.
By a level.
I think like it's really interesting because watching the DRX series, I really liked the game where they had like Deft play Ziggs, and then they had the Pyke, right? And Deft just kind of cleared the mid lane, and that's basically what the AD carry does. It's like for me the perfect conception of what the AD carry does in this meta is he just like clears the wave first, and the support roams and controls the area around the lane, and you win the game. So that's why like
as long as top doesn't int too much.
Yeah, of course. Like the guy was massively feeding.
Yes.
I actually by making Puff like all team AD carry, they actually set up their drafts to play around bottom, but it was very clear IG had no idea how to do it. I just chain fed. So I think that actually the LPL gamed IG by making Puff all team AD carry. They made them think they had to play around bot. It's really troll.
Do you have any other angles on this, Ashley, that you'd like to bring up? Is there any angle we haven't brought up that was interesting to you?
I don't know. I think the big debate, because while we were going, if I had to pick the MSI winner, I'll actually go with G2 with the perk spot lane. And I think Kelsey, through our discussion, is slowly leaning towards JDG. My question is, I think we went back to it, but do you think JDG's game plan can hold against other top teams in the league, especially around the world, especially against T1 and G2? I'm actually genuinely curious.
So I went into the VOD reviews expecting to think that JDG could even lose to C9, right? Like just based on the final, because the memory of the finals. But when I was watching the games, I was just more and more kind of changing my mind about them. And even the final is like terrible to looked. And especially like some of the stuff that they did in the semifinal, I was really critical of the way that they were setting up the objectives, and that's why I thought TES would easily beat them. But then I saw kind of like a method to their madness. They were just slow to move on some of the plays that they had set up, but it didn't matter because FPX had castrated themselves, but that's beside the point. I think that for me, like JDG, assuming, because I went into this exercise also assuming it would be cap spot. So based on that, I ended up convincing myself that JDG would win. I'm unsure on the G2 thing. I think there are a lot of variables there. I want to say that G2 would probably win with perk spots, just because I think that team is just like really, really solid in almost every dimension that I give JDG some credit for. They're very, very flexible. I think that they can play the style that C9 wants to play a little bit better, but I just think the meta suits JDG so well. Like the meta could easily decide this tournament in JDG's favor. So,
and if I had to note one thing, because I'm more of an interviewer / like interacting with the players in a personal way, like less on the analytical strategy side, and we just can't forget the fact that this G2, this entire roster, has a track record of performing in big international tournaments. Like given that this is like, we are assuming it's an MSI and we may or may not have crowds, but we can't doubt that this is a huge stage. And this Jingdong Gaming roster is, relatively new. I would say it has individual veteran players.
For this level of tournament, they're basically rookies,
Yeah, and Loken haven't had like a Worlds experience. And even at T1, the memories of 2019 might come back to haunt them possibly. Cuz has an interesting track record when it comes to international stages, and Kana is a complete rookie. And I don't think we can factor that out, a team's track record playing in a big match. And that's why one of the reasons why a lot of like experts rate Faker so high, and that's one of the reasons why I would slightly tip it towards G2.
Yeah, I think that's very fair.
I just think G2's fundamentals are so solid, right? They're so good. So for me, it's just really easy to kind of pick them as my favorite until they start to suck, right? At almost every international event. I think that's, yeah.
I would also echo a similar sentiment, but I would phrase it like this. Like, one of the things I do enjoy very much in esports is trying to look stylistically how teams match up. And I think the intangible that G2 would have a huge edge in this regard is, of the teams that are there, G2 is the best team when the game plan goes out the window. Like the other teams, it would be about, can they impose their style? Can they play to their strengths? Like more traditional League of Legends. Whereas that's where I actually feel like any of the G2 teams could do something really, really special at a tournament like this, which is why it's always hard to count them out no matter what happens. One thing I did want to ask, though, is of you actually, Ashley, is I forget if you asked him this in your interview with him, but when you interviewed Kanavi, right, I've seen online people who are just fans, so I'm trying to corroborate how realistic this is. They claim that he is already fluent in Mandarin, that he can basically just speak Chinese to his teammates. Is this something you've heard?
So I haven't asked this question directly, but he did mention to me that near the end of his last year, he was getting pretty good at Chinese.
Okay.
And he was conversing with his teammates. And it's really good for him that he's now teammates with Loken. He's pretty much fluent in Chinese. So Loken is also there to help out. But yes, Kanavi is like conversational level, but not fluent level, based on what I've seen. But someone might correct me on the comments.
Okay, because that would be another area I'd add in the intangible. That if you're this like rookie jungler coming up, not only that, everyone's literally saying you're the best in the world. You come from the region that's supposed to win the international tournaments. Like, comms is the easiest thing to go to shit when you're in a pressure moment like that. But if he doesn't have issues, that's actually quite somewhat reassuring, I have to say. Because his style does demand, as far as I can tell, that he has pretty good comms with his team.
Yeah, he really has to rely on his laners to set him up to just kind of carry the game. So I think, communication would be really important for him.
By the way, you didn't grab onto the bait I gave before where I tried to like shove him into the clear love box there. Because one of the things I do appreciate about Kanavi is sometimes that's the thing. If you can't stop him, then he will just come out way too powerful as a jungler. Like, what do you think of, doesn't have to be that example, but what do you think of him in that regard as a jungler?
So I guess one criticism I would levy at Kanavi is that there are certain windows that I think he could take early that he doesn't. So I think it was like the FPX series, the very first game, where I feel like FPX's draft was just like the worst draft I've seen all season, where they somehow managed to draft like lanes that got outscaled and lost in across every single lane. And so Kanavi had the option, and he was playing Graves, so Kanavi had the option to just really take over the jungle, and all he did was full clear his own camps and recall, and then he invaded on the second clear. But I thought that was like a really big missed opportunity, so maybe he plays a little bit too slow. But I think that he can for sure like kind of develop into the type of player that Clearlove that I praise Clearlove for, and I think the meta is coming back to the type of jungle meta where Clearlove would have excelled. So
like part of it is that because Thorin reminded me of that interview with Kanavi, I asked him, hey, this specific style that JDD is having, like, giving you a lot of resource and a lot of room to become the carrier of the team, is this something that is imposed by your play style, or is it something that comes from the team? And he kind of implied that it actually comes from the team, that he can play multiple types of styles, but given that he kind of has to be the carrier, I guess I see the hint of Yagao and Loken like not being able to be the two carries on that. But anyway, so
I feel so bad for you now.
Oh,
because he comes up at the same time as Knight. They both come from the telecom teams. They're from the same hometown. This guy is
just a worse version, though, isn't he? So that's the problem.
He's just going to be compared to Knight his entire career, and people are just going to see him as trash, and it's so sad, actually. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but it's also true that like Jingdong Gaming decided that this is the winning formula to let Kanavi be the carry, like with Yagao and Loken, and they only started playing with Zoom again more recently. So given time, because Kanavi is still relatively really, really young, and I've seen some of his solo queue games, and he can be a more aggressive early game player with practice across multiple metas and possibly with different rosters. Maybe I'm not assuming anything. He might end up developing multiple styles and become Klerov or Jenkos, like people who can play, like pull out any kind of weapon from this shit.
Okay. What about this then? How about as a final topic, right? If we're all leaning towards G2, who would then be the MVP of the tournament here? Like, who should be the player from G2 who should play so well that they would win this tournament? Who would you pick here, Ashley? Who would be the best for you if they're going to win?
Jenkos? I don't know. Maybe Jenkos or Perks. I don't know.
Sure. One thing I appreciate, by the way, about the world Jankos is in the past, that sort of a team, you would always get fucked as the jungler because you're always making the other people look good and therefore they win the MVP. And it's like you're in some mad sort of like catch-22 where you can't win unless they feed and you look good, but then you're probably not going to win the game if the jungler does that. I noticed because he has so many insane teammates, it's almost gone full circle and now he gets all the credit again. So I love that. I actually think that's great. I'm with you on that one. What do you think, Kelsey? Who would you pick?
I feel like Perks could like legit sprint it, run it down every game, and still get the MVP. Just because
everyone wants him to be the best, don't they? Yeah, of course.
I mean, just because people will like see G2 winning MSI with Perks in bot lane, and they'll see that they look like a better team, and they'll compare. It's like, oh, Caps can't do this, so Perks must be the best team player on the team. So obviously, like people will logic themselves into giving him the MVP. In terms of like the actual MVP, I think this is either a tournament for junglers or supports to be MVP.
Actually, that's one thing. Maybe we should reference that because we didn't really mention Mickey X much as a player, mainly because we don't know what bot lane he'd be with, and then obviously, like, I have a hard time being too critical of him this split because he was babysitting Caps. Like, I thought that was kind of bullshit, actually. So, what do you have any thoughts on Mickey X, the player, Ashley?
I'm gonna be really honest. I'm more of a top of jungle watcher, so I don't have too much of it. So, like, I do watch all the lanes, but I wouldn't have that much insight on supports just because I'm a top / jungle player.
That's all right.
Yeah, like, I don't know. Maybe I can hear what Kelsey has to offer here, and maybe I'll add into that.
So I actually think like this wasn't Mickey X's best split. But just in terms of also his timings and his like general play execution. But I also think, let's see, the other supports that are here are Effort Vulcan and Lumao.
Yeah.
Which I think Lumao is an interesting player because he's kind of like a Renaissance man in the sense that he like has a gigantic bag of tricks, but I don't think he super excels at any of them, right? And like, I guess there's that highlight Bard play that people will point to from the final. And he has like a few picks that he can do really well on, but I think that Mickey X might be the best support of the tournament anyway. So yeah, I don't know. He could get the MVP.
Okay. I think we can just leave it on that note. Is that everything?
Yeah, I think that's everything. Like, given that Kelsey has pointed out the 4 supports in the MSI, I would actually agree with that statement.
All right, yeah. This video was kindly supported by Alexander Rao, Dean Tanglis, Emanuel Särnbratt, JDubs, NateDOhDoubleG, the Puyallup Tribe, Tobias Bernasconi, Xinged, and a special thanks always goes out to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my shows? Maybe ask a question in my monthly video AMA? Do you want teasers? Who are the guests on my next content? Maybe you want to take part in one of those donated discussions with me where we go really deep into the weeds. Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today in the description box link below.